So thank you for joining us to another webinar organized by the ICT Pro TT, the Committee of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago. Our aim is to help improve the national ICT capabilities through engagement and partnership with people, businesses, and government. Today's webinar is aimed at helping IT professionals find ways to increase the successful adoption of IT solutions. Our presenter today is Nalini Singh, a management consulting professional, lecturer at ALJGSB SBCS. She will be sharing with us some of her experience and provide guidance on change management. We will be having an open Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to leave your questions on the YouTube chat or email us at ictprott@gmail.com. And with that, thank you, Nalini, for being with us today, and I will pass the mic on to you.
Thanks, Eddie. Okay, and thank you for joining us today. Hope everybody is doing really good. So, like Eddie said, my name is Nalini. I'm a management consultant by profession. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a little while. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the proactive role of the IT department in terms of change management. First thing, though, I want to do is to set your expectations a little bit. What is change management? What do I mean when I say that? Well, I'm looking specifically at the management of the people side of change as they move from their current state to a new future state. So, for instance, when employees have to move maybe from a manual way of doing things to an automated one. So that's what I mean when I say change management. Okay, now before we actually get into the agenda for today, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay? So I'm sure when you would have seen this ad, maybe you were thinking and scratching your head, change management. What does this really have to do with me? How is this relevant? So I want to address that first of all. In IT, we invest a lot of time, effort, and money into designing, developing, and deploying project-based IT solutions. Whether it's an ERP system that we deploy to automate our business processes and facilitate workflow, or whether it's an in-house developed Microsoft Access database to track employee time. And these are typically handled using a project management approach. So we're typically part of a project team. What does that mean? Well, as part of a project team, we are responsible to stakeholders for the successful delivery of our projects. But what exactly do we mean by success? Not so long ago, we would have defined success in terms of successful delivery of a technically sound IT solution within budget and on time. In fact, that's the holy grail of IT project management: scope, time, cost. So we would have been satisfied not so long ago with just delivering something that works fine. Now, however, our view of what success means in the context of a project is evolving. Success is being increasingly viewed as not just delivery of a product, but of delivery of a service. And in fact, people familiar with ITIL, and I'm not going to go into the ITIL too much here, but people familiar with ITIL will know that ITIL envisions the IT department being run like a business. And services are required to provide utility and warranty. So it should be fit for purpose as well as fit for use. Okay, best practice in IT now looks at managing an IT department as a business and treating our internal business units as our customers, whether it's HR or accounts or marketing. And project success now, the definition of success has been widened. It doesn't matter if we deliver a technically sound solution. If nobody uses it, it doesn't add any organizational value. If we don't have user buy-in and support, the project will be a failure. And change management is really the key to getting users on board, getting them to adopt our IT solutions. In IT, we like to think, okay, we develop a solution, people will use it. But if these assumptions were always true, each change would always yield our desired outcome every time. So while we're here thinking that we've developed a solution and people will use it, the reality is often very, very different. Resistance to change is the norm, not the exception. Some people may use the solution, not everyone. In fact, you will always have those users finding workarounds or simply opting out of using it. It will take time for people to get on board. People change at different rates. People will end up using it at different proficiencies. So there's a huge gap that exists between our expectations for the systems we deploy and the user reality. So what I'm saying is that we, as IT staffers, we can assist in bridging this gap between expectations and reality and assisting our users to transition from their current state to their future state and to embrace and adopt change. In terms of how can IT staff be a part of this? We are the ones with our ears to the ground. Okay, we work very closely with our users when we're transitioning a project into operations. We're the ones who hear why the new system is a waste of time, what they would do differently, what they like, what they don't like. Okay, so as IT staffers, we are uniquely positioned to identify early warning signs of resistance to change. And we can assist in gathering what I like to call change readiness intelligence. And we'll talk about that some more. So I'm saying change is a process. Everybody goes through it at a different rate. If we understand the change process and how users behave, we can flag, identify, and pinpoint issues that should be addressed to be able to get successful IT adoption. I'm saying that IT staffers need to be change agents. And this is not a term that should just refer to your project managers or your change practitioners. This includes anyone and everyone who can assist our individuals, our users, to transition from their own current state to the new future state. So now that you understand what I mean by change and change management, and you're beginning to see that as IT staff members, we have a role to play, let's get into the agenda today. So I hope I've adequately set the stage and set your expectations. So in terms of what we want to deal with today, I want to look at how we can use change management as a tool to improve usage of those IT systems we spend a lot of time designing, developing, and deploying. We're going to look at why it's necessary to take a customized or an individual approach to change management, as opposed to viewing the organization as a mass of people and everybody going through the change at the same pace. And we're going to see how we, as IT staff members, can assist in reducing this resistance to change. So all of this I want to talk about today. Just a little bit about me. Okay, so I will leave you to read all of that at your leisure, but I'm an independent management consultant. Okay, I gained most of my consulting experience working at KPMG as the assistant manager for the Business Performance Improvement Service Line, BPI. That's quite a mouthful. What does it mean? It really focuses on improving the performance of organizations at the operational, tactical, and strategic level. And you know that anything that has to do with improving performance generally requires the adoption of new values, skills, and behaviors. So change management is a necessary part of that process. Okay, so I have experience working with change management. So let's move into what we actually plan to discuss today. And I'm sure we've all been in these situations, we've seen these things. How many times have we had management consultants come in? They do some sort of business process improvement exercise that usually results in tighter bonding of the IT systems with the business processes to automate them. At the end of the day, when the consultants leave, people go back to doing what they were doing. Or what about we have our systems? Take our ERP system, for instance. Okay, we integrate it with our operations to automate our business processes, improve workflow. At the end of the day, people always find ways to work around it. How many times have we released new software tools that are not being used? You can have a perfectly designed process. If no one follows it, it's not going to produce an improvement in performance. You could have a perfectly designed technology. If no one uses it, it creates no additional value. Let's look at this example, and I have a little story to tell here. Let's consider the integration of an ERP system in a manufacturing company. Let's say our system is end-to-end. So we're connecting customer order entry directly to manufacturing and inventory control. The idea is to speed order fulfillment for customers, increase inventory accuracy, and enable just-in-time manufacturing. So let's meet Bob. Bob is an order fulfillment specialist working in the warehousing department. One day, Bob receives a customer order via the new ERP system. So this system has recently been integrated with their operations. Now, Bob knows the product exists because he saw it in the warehouse earlier that day. However, when he attempted to process the order, the system had the current inventory being listed as 0. Because the new process required the item to be entered in the inventory module. So even though this product was right there, sitting on the shelf, Bob could see it, he couldn't ship it to the customer. Investigations revealed Jim from the manufacturing department was resistant to change. He didn't like the new system. It was a new step. He spent a lot of time inputting this. He didn't have to do this before. So he opted out to use it, or he didn't enter inventory in a timely manner. What is the moral or the morals of this story? Well, there are two sides of change. And in IT, we're normally very, very good at handling the technical side of change. Okay? Very rarely does a project fail because of the technical side of it. But the people side is a different story. We fail to manage the people side of change. And what happens? We have lower IT utilization rates, slower speed of IT adoption, and at the end of the day, the customer feels it. We have failed customer outcomes. Moral number 1. Moral number 2. At the end of the day, change is an individual phenomenon. Everybody talks about the need for change in the culture and organizational change, but it boils down to change has to occur one person at a time. What is an organization if not a collection of people? The organization changes when the individuals in that organization changes. And the outcomes of the change are linked to these individuals doing their jobs differently. When numerous individual shifts are taken together as a whole, then and only then is the desired future organizational state achieved. Say my little example. Bob was on board with the change, but Bob changing by himself is not enough. Each person in the chain must engage in change. So before we get into this change management thing a little bit further, let's look at some key change concepts. I'm going to introduce a little bit of theory here. Okay, not too much, but a little bit. Organizational change can be represented as 3 states of change. When an organization changes, we move from a current state through a transition state through a future state. In the current state, we look at how things are being done today. The transition state looks at what is required to move the organization from the current state to the future state. Well, the future state looks at how things will be done tomorrow. So we're saying we're representing the organization as these three change of states, or three states of change rather. Now remember, an organization is basically a collection of individuals. The organizational future state is only rarely achieved if the collection of individuals within the organization are able to successfully move from their current state to the desired future state. And an individual future state can be described by the ProSci-ADCA model. So now I'm introducing some theory here, but bear a little bit with me. Just want to explain the basis of this ADCA model. So ADCA is an acronym: A for awareness, D for desire, K for knowledge, A for ability, R for reinforcement. Let's talk a little bit about what that means. In the current state, to move out of the current state rather, an individual needs, first of all, awareness of the need to change. He or she also needs a desire to participate and support the change. Successfully moving through the transition state requires knowledge on how to change and ability to be able to implement the required skills and behaviors. In the future state, that ability is utilized and reinforcement is required to sustain the change. Okay, so ADCA really describes the phases that an individual will go through when faced with change. So it really looks at the change management as a process comprising of different phases or stages. Awareness, that's the A. Awareness is often equated with communication. And we think, okay, the organization sends out an email or a memo saying, you know, this system is coming on board, everybody needs to move to suit. We think that is communication. However, the act of communicating in that case does not always produce awareness. Staff should understand what the change is, why it is being made, what are the risks of not changing from the current state. In terms of desire, and this is often the hardest part to achieve, desire looks at what's in it for me in terms of, you know, from the individual employee's point of view. Ultimately, this desire is about personal choice, personal motivation to change. Knowledge. And what organizations tend to do, they think change management is all about communicating in a memo, we're going to change, and then we throw in some training at employees. So we send them on some training and we think that's change management. But if you have, so we're saying that this ADCA process, one step builds on the other. Before you tackle the knowledge aspect, you need to effectively deal with the awareness and the desire to change. Knowledge looks at the skills and behaviors required during and after the change. So efforts to build knowledge will not be successful unless you've successfully addressed awareness and desire. It will have the potential to create even more resistance to change. Knowledge looks at equipping employees or individuals with the tools and the information required to be able to do their jobs with the change. Ability looks at demonstrated ability to implement the change. So in other words, using these tools and the information given. At the end of the day, though, we have a natural tendency to backslide. If we don't reinforce things, we're going to revert to old ways. So we need to have mechanisms to keep the change in place, whether it's some sort of reward system, recognition, incentives, penalties. There needs to be some sort of reinforcement. Change is difficult, but actually sustaining it could be even more difficult. So reinforcement is a very important part of the model. It encourages and supports the change to ensure that the new way stays in place. So now that we understand some of those key change concepts, let's think about change management from the individual employee's perspective. And each person's change journey is different. In fact, each person may not even find out about a change at the same time. This especially happens when you have geographically dispersed offices. So in my example here, Mary, for instance, may have found out about this impending change in the organization after Jane. Each person goes through the change at a different pace. In my example, Jane spent a lot of time developing the ability, so using the tools and the information she was given to be able to do her job better. Peter, on the other hand, he didn't get an effective answer to that question. What's in it for me? He had no desire to change. He was not motivated. So he spent a lot of time in that stage. So key takeaway here, everybody goes through change at a different rate, at a different pace. And generic organizational change activity often miss the mark because they tend to treat the organization as a mass of people going through the change at the same rate. Change management is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It has to be customized on an individual basis. And IT, as staffers, we IT staff can assist in getting users to successfully go through the change process. How can we assist? Well, as we're working on our IT projects, we're assisting users to transition these projects into operation. If we understand the ADKAR approach to change, we could use ADKAR to identify when objections to change, first of all, are legitimate objections based on, whether it's a flawed design or a solution, or whether it's simply resistance to change. We can use ADKAR to provide focus for the conversations about change. We're the ones interacting closely with our users. Okay? We're the ones having the conversations with them. We engage them. We can help pinpoint change issues by asking specific questions based on an understanding of the ADKAR change model. How can we help? So this makes it a little bit more practical. In engaging with our users, we're working to gather what I like to call change intelligence. Okay? So we're talking with them very informally, but we're gathering information at the same time. We're asking them questions and engaging them around awareness, for instance. Okay? Do they agree with the business reasons for making the change? Do they believe the change is necessary? In terms of desire, we engage in them in terms of, do they want this change to happen? What would cause them to change? What incentives would they require? Questions around knowledge. Do they know how to change? Do they have the required skills and behaviors to support the change? Questions around ability. Are they capable of actually making the change? Is there anything preventing them from making the change? In terms of reinforcement, are they receiving the necessary support and reinforcement to sustain the change? Are there incentives that would make the change stick? So this is not an exhaustive list of questions, but this just shows some of the questions you can use to, help pick their brains a little bit, find out where they are at in terms of that change process, what stage they are at. And when we gather this information, and mind you, there may be a more formal approach as well. This is very informal, okay? But we're assisting in gathering information here. Some organizations may actually have more focused ADKAR assessment sessions. So you may have little focus groups with your end users, and ProSci has a lot of templates concerning, individual change. So they may be administered to users in that type of setting. So we're saying this can be combined with that, or this can replace that in an informal way. Okay, so once we have our input about our users, we can develop staff profiles. And what does this profile show? An individual's readiness to change. We can develop profiles on an individual basis. We can collate the information and look at it by areas, by departments, to pinpoint, a particular area may have a particular problem at, whether it's with awareness of the change or ability to change. So it helps pinpoint the exact issues that we're faced with. Because the problem is organizational change models tend to just throw training at employees and they think that will fix it. But if we can effectively profile our users, we can customize or tailor a change management approach and build that into the deployment or the rollout of our IT system. And this will be a lot more effective in getting users to adopt our IT systems. So in terms of this profile, it is typically shown in a bar graph. 1 is generally regarded as the lowest. So a 1 for awareness might mean that you believe a person has very little awareness of the reason for a change, that the change is needed. 5 is at the highest level. So 5 might be the highest degree of compliance or understanding in that particular area. And we're saying that anything, in fact, the first element that scores a 3 or below is where corrective action should be focused. This is what is known as a barrier point. So for instance, and I have 2 examples on this slide here. These are example ADCA staff profile. In my first example on the left, the first area that has a score of 3 or less is awareness. So in other words, throwing training at this employee will not work. This has to do with communicating, first of all, the reasons for change. The employee needs to have that sort of communication to develop an awareness for why he or she needs to change. In my second example, desire is the first area with a 3 or lower. So in other words, continually repeating the reasons for change will not produce progress. It may actually frustrate the individual. You must address the individual's inherent desire to change. Now, I know this sounds a little airy-fairy, so let me bring in a little example here. Let's take a fictitious organization is introducing let's say a time management application. Okay, so previously employees may not have been required to enter their times when they show up to work or when they leave work and track their time throughout the day. Enter my time tracking application. So now, employees thinking, well, you know, management gonna see what time I clock in, what time I clock out, how much time I take for lunch, what are the different activities I spend my day doing. Okay? You introduce a system to that, I can guarantee you resistance will be the norm. It's gonna get people's back up one time. They think management trying to police them. How do we address desire in a situation like this? Desire has to do with what's in it for me. So typically, supervisors would normally have, you know, these conversations with their staff. Okay? In terms of building desire, and I could quote a lot of motivation theory here, but I wouldn't. Basically, you have to figure out what motivates people. People are generally motivated if they have some sort of incentive, okay, some sort of reward, or if there's a penalty or consequence. So in this instance, management unrolling or rolling out my time management application as an incentive to employee, this is where supervisors show their staff, okay, how can this help them? Well, it will help me to track your time better in terms of overtime payments. You know, it's not going to be a matter he said, she said anymore. You have exact calculation as to how much time you work. You're going to get paid on time. Okay, you don't have to worry about, you know, discrepancies in your overtime payment. That might be one incentive. In terms of motivation, people might also be motivated because of fear of a consequence or a desire to avoid something unpleasant. What might be a motivation in this case? Well, staff might be motivated if they are told, here's what, we have a new policy in place, and this is where policies can be used to enforce compliance too. We have a new policy in place, we're not paying people for overtime unless it's entered in the system. Another way to get people motivated, so you have the policies you're developing in tandem with that. Also, tie it into their performance management system, okay, usage of the system. Once you tie it into people's performance plan, you bet your bottom dollar you're going to get people starting to use the system. Okay, so those are just some ideas for how you're building desire, because this is really one of the toughest things to tackle, the desire aspect, because what may motivate one person may not motivate another. If knowledge is the first area that was a 3 or lower, we have to be careful not to dwell on motivating factors because somebody who's already at this point might be discouraged. In this case, education and training may be needed to develop the skills and behavior. If ability was the first area with a 3 or lower, then we have to recognize firstly that the person would need time to develop new skills and behavior and will need ongoing coaching and support. It's not enough to offer training and you offer that training one time and it's done and over with. It has to be on an ongoing basis. If reinforcement is required, so in other words, if the staff profile says the first area with a 3 or lower is reinforcement, you will need to address incentives or consequences for not acting in a new way. Okay, but back to desire as well. Okay, and this is a problem we typically have with how do we get user buy-in? How do we get support? They have to be part of the process from the get-go. Okay, change is something that has to be part of the whole approach from the inception of the project. They have to be part of it, whether it's part of a focus group to gather requirements. They need to feel as if they're part of the solution. So I'm saying, okay, we can use ADKAR to help identify the gaps. When I'm saying gaps in terms of where our users are at and where we want them to be. And based on that gap, we have different mechanisms to address. For instance, awareness. Okay? We need to focus on why are we making the change? What are the business drivers for change? What is the risk of not changing? And the most effective communication typically comes from immediate supervisors here because they can have this discussion of how this change will impact staff directly. In terms of desire, you need to answer the what's in it for me question for those who are resistant. This has to be tackled at a personal level. In terms of knowledge, and this is where different training groups and HR might get involved to figure out what are the training requirements. Okay, knowledge, typically one of the easiest areas to address because training, can be brought into play here. In terms of ability, coaching by supervisors, troubleshooting guides, on-the-job training. You want to get people to not just have the tools and knowledge and information at their fingertips, but know how to implement it into practice. And in terms of reinforcement, management needs to underscore the message that here's what this change is here to stay. You need to have incentives, need to have penalties or consequences for non-compliance to ensure that people don't backslide. I'm saying that as IT staff, we need to understand the ADKAR change process and the behaviors exhibited by staff going through it so we can assist in improving IT adoption. If all the elements of ADKAR are present, in other words, we have awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement, then change will be successful. If any element is missing, if any one element is missing, change will not occur. So for instance, if awareness is missing, staff will be confused. They may not know if they're doing the right steps. If desire is missing, staff may be resistant to change. The what's in it for me question has not been adequately answered. If the knowledge element is missing, staff may experience fear and anxiety about the change. If the ability aspect is missing, you're being asked to do something and you don't know how to do it, so staff will feel very frustrated. If the reinforcement part is missing, you will go back to your old ways because you haven't seen that the change is beneficial to you. So we're saying, you as IT staff members, if you understand this ADKAR model and you understand the behaviors exhibited at each of these stages, you can use this to help profile staff. So you can pinpoint areas where they may need some additional assistance. And this can help to create a customized change management approach. And why do we want a customized change management approach? Because we will always get some people adopting, but we don't want to leave anybody behind. Okay, so this enables us to get everybody on board. It increases IT adoption, and it allows people to move at a pace, okay, that they're comfortable with. When we get buy-in and support from our users, only and truly, when our users are satisfied at the outcomes, only then can we say this project is a success. Okay, and that's my webinar for today. I hope that we all learned something today, and we will try to apply this ADKA next time we look at deploying one of our IT systems to assist us with engaging our users and increasing their adoption of the IT. So thank you. We will move to the question and answer session now. Right, so I have 3 questions here. So the first question is, what is the most effective way to communicate the importance of change management when the organizational culture does not see the value? Very good question, because all the textbooks you read and whatnot will tell you change has to be a phenomenon that starts at the top. Management has to walk the walk and set the pace in terms of the organizational culture. But what happens when they don't see the value of that? Well, this is where I say change management has to be built into the project management approach. If you can't attack it at the strategic level, attack it at the operational level. It has to be part and parcel of the project management life cycle. What do I mean by that? So typically, when you're developing a project, you may have 4 basic stages. You have your project initiation stage, where you establish the business need for the project. You have your planning or your design stage. You have your execution, also known as the implementation stage. And you have your post-implementation or your closure. I'm saying the implementation of the technical solution must occur in tandem with the people side of the change. So in other words, when we're in the initiation phase of the project and we're establishing the business need for the project, we need to incorporate change management activities that focus on awareness and building desire. These are going to be incorporated as part of the overall project management approach. So it's going to be dealt with on a project-by-project basis. In terms of the project planning or design stage, we need to incorporate activities aimed at building knowledge, so training occurs here. In terms of execution, incorporate activities aimed at building ability. So this is ongoing coaching and support we're looking at. In terms of closure or post-implementation, this is where we want to look at reinforcement activities. So what I'm saying is, as the project goes through the project life cycle, we have the ADKA life cycle too that we go through at the same time and at the same rate. So that's how you build in change as part of the whole project management approach. In terms of my second question, is it necessary to create a burning platform in order to create awareness of the need to change? In other words, do we need to do this big grand gesture? Okay, do we need to create this sense of urgency and importance around change? I would say no. Okay, so this speaks to what I was discussing just now. Change management can be built into the overall project management approach. They kind of sneak it in there. It's not that people think, oh, we're doing this big change program and change is coming and we have this whole program mapped up. No, it's built into and it's part and parcel of the overall project management approach. In fact, good change management should be seamlessly integrated into the overall approach for carrying out the work of the project. My third question here, an actual example, not theory, on how to gain buy-in from end users when making changes to the way things are done. Right, because we read all those lovely management textbooks and we get a lot of theory, but nobody deals with how do you actually make change. Well, if we're using the ADKA model, this pertains to desire. Like we discussed before, the most difficult part of the ADKA change process. So we need to create the desire in individuals to participate and support the change. We need to effectively address the what's in it for me question. You need to focus on personal motivating factors. And again, just to refer to my time management example, motivators in that case might include, so incentives, how will employees be better off after the change? Okay, so with my time management application, overtime will be better calculated, for instance, it will be paid on time. There's no discrepancy. You can also motivate people because you have a fear of a consequence or penalty. So for instance, overtime will not be paid unless employees enter time on the system. And this goes hand in hand with the policies that you need to establish to be able to enforce compliance. Use of the system could also be considered as part of performance review for the employee. How do you build desire? This is where supervisors have to work very closely with their employees, engage employees, act as coaches. And like I mentioned before, employees should be involved in creating the solutions. Part of a focus group, for instance, when gathering requirements. Okay, so I have another question. So I have two more questions. What are the ideal qualities of a change agent? Now, a change agent doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could be a programmer, you could be a business analyst, you could be a network administrator. Anybody can be a change agent. What I would say is that you need to have powers of observation. Once you understand this ADKA model, you understand how to build, how to transition an employee from one stage to the next, what are the behaviors exhibited at each stage, you can be a change agent. Okay? And in IT, all of us can be change agents. We're all in a position to gather intelligence on an individual's readiness to change. And my final question here is, how do we change management's view of IT to reduce shadow IT? In terms of shadow IT now, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the shadow IT here, but I'll try to address the question. Okay? How do we change management's view of IT to reduce shadow IT? Okay, so I presume you're talking about IT having to do all of these things in the background. To tell you the truth, you may not be able to change management's view of IT. Okay? And in fact, a good indicator of the importance that management places on IT is, you see that CIO role in your organization? Your organization doesn't have a CIO, or not necessarily with that, title, but somebody functioning in that role. That tells you a lot about management's view of IT. Okay? If management doesn't view IT as something to be taken seriously, and is that what we're talking about, the shadow IT? Okay. I'm saying IT can still effect change. It just has to be built at the operational level as opposed to at the executive level. So it is possible. And my last question here, how important is the line manager as opposed to IT personnel in realizing success, change success? Very important, because IT has a part to play, we all have a part to play. Okay, so the line manager and IT must partner very closely. Okay, IT is going to be working with our end users. Okay, the line managers might be in an even better position. These are their staff to be able to offer guidance. So it is definitely a very close partnership here we're talking about. This isn't something that IT is doing alone. Okay, but we all have to be in this thing together. Okay, and I believe those are all the questions. So thank you very much for your time. I hope it has been very beneficial. Until next time, take care and have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you, Nalini, and for all the participants as well to participate in the webinar. We hope you enjoyed this webinar and that it will increase successful adoption of IT solutions in your environment. This presentation is saved on YouTube as always. So it's going to be publicly available for you or anyone else to view in the future, so feel free to share it. I also want to encourage everybody to reach out to Nalini for any further support or help. I'm sure she makes herself available for any opportunity to help you in your business. So thank you again to everybody, and stay tuned for more webinars and activities from our ICT Pro TT. Thank you.